So let's say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research.
All right, this is the Dapper Dino channel, and we are here for an after show for the RJ Downard versus Standing for Truth debate on, I'm hoping I'm getting this right, evolution or Adam and Eve. And I want to introduce RJ first to get his impressions on how he thinks the debate went. So RJ, take it away.
And I'm just a little avatar here because I don't want to overload the feed with my damn camera, which could get troublesome. We don't want a robot. I think I performed the goals that I needed to do. Standing wanted to do the whole shtick with his created heterozygosity and mitochondrial DNA and chromosome 2 fusion and all of that. It was the typical element. And he actually wanted me to go first. So I summarized very quickly, and it says I represent the standard evolutionary view. He disagrees with all of that. He's going to talk about A, B, C, and D, which he did, in fact, talk about all those exact things. You nailed his argument perfectly, Erica. And I said, that's not what interests me. I want him to apply his model to an actual set of data, which was the evolution of the appearance of Homo sapiens in the Americas. And I chose that deliberately because I knew that there's nothing on it in the creationist literature. They're nowhere near figuring out what's going on in there. Therefore, there's nothing for him to have copied, even if he were aware of the little discussion that there is. And so he'd have to wing it. He'd have to think through what he actually thinks about what is happening, how fast are Noah's kids breeding, where are they arriving, what are they taking with them. It literally didn't dawn on him that the crops, the food crops in the Americas are different than the rest of the world. This is a staggering difference. There's corn, maize, as everybody else calls it, potatoes, I mentioned chocolate, tomatoes. And where was this on the ark? Why didn't the other kids pick up on this stuff? Why didn't they pick up wheat? All of these things. And he'd never thought about that. And he scampered back to his mantras at every opportunity. So he did exactly what I suspected. He has no model. It's useless. And all he could do is go back on the mantra that he's used with you. Well, where's the predictions? Where's the evolutionary predictions? Young Earth creationism makes these detailed predictions that are, wow, that genetics are going to be functional. That things that do stuff are going to do stuff, and they will do stuff in a nested hierarchy because things are related because they're the same kind. And that, well, that's kind of, yeah.
But
how
RJ,
do you distinguish?
RJ, if young Earth creationism is true, then we will observe observations. Everyone knows that.
Absolutely. There's going to be lots of observations. And worse, yes, more importantly, Jensen will say the observations, and therefore they are true.
Well, I mean, once he says it, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that as well. The whole idea, and I mentioned this in my conversation with Standing quite recently, but his whole idea that it's like, look at young Earth creationism, we make all of these predictions. And what I said to him then stands now, which is, yes, we are making predictions as well. It's just ours take quite some time to pan out as far as how mutation rates are going to further evolve, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's when you kind of have the opportunity to say, hey, how's that Jensen Khoisan people paper doing? Which we still don't have.
I feel like that will just die.
He brought up the Khoisans. And I was kind of looking into that because there was a technical paper. Let me see if I can spot it here in my little pile of stuff. Because there was a, oh, yipes. I think it's maybe the ancient West Eurasian ancestry in southern and eastern Africa. That one. And anyway, the thing is that none of this is a challenge to the evolutionary paradigm. No demographer, as far as I can tell, is rending their garments in despair that this genetic data is somehow throwing everything off. No, they just fold it into the thing. Some things are apparently like 300,000 years ago, and another thing might be 180,000, another one might be like 7,500, and another thing is going on in recent times as you have people coming in from the Arab world and blah, blah, blah. All of this stuff it's non-controversial. It's just working out the fiddly bits. Meanwhile, Jensen on his Olympian mountain is ready to go to decree what's going on. Supposedly, Jensen has done a paper very recently on the peopling of the Americas, and I don't know that I'm aware of that one. If it's one that I already am aware of, I think that may be a case where Standing for Truth has really overplayed his hand, but we'll find out when he actually delivers the goods on what source that is.
Oh boy, I think Standing should hope that this is if this paper truly is all that he's hoping it's for. I should hope that he, really does genuinely have that much confidence in it, because there is an almost certainty that we'll end up taking it apart if it really has anything kind of worth looking into.
Oh, I think that should be a video.
Oh yeah,
right there.
because
One moment, guys.
It definitely fits into volume 2, because we have a chapter on human evolution directly, particularly with some of the stuff that Menton has done away with. And then, of course, it pops up with the flood model and Noah's Ark and all of that on the distribution of people in that context and that whole cultural material. So there's just layers on layers of stuff that if he's got his little paper, we're going to discuss it in volume 2.
Which I
if
look
it's
forward
not,
to.
we'll probably allude to the fact that Standing was trying to overplay his hand. Data field now. And of course, you've also got all that archaeological material on Clovis points and various hunting things. That was another thing that I tried to bring up. I was trying to get him to say, were there horses with the Native Americans? What is their connection to horses? Because as it turns out, Native Americans had horses they bumped into. They're another species of now extinct horse that they hunted to extinction. Horses and camels and mastodons and others, the American Indians were hunting all over the place. Now, he got into would have gotten into a bottleneck if he had tried to turn his thinking cap on, but he evaded. He ran from the issue. If mastodons if there are no human beings in the New World before the flood, because only human beings lived in that little area around where Eden was that he was very vague on too. He was scratching his head on that one. Then all of the examples of Native Americans hunting mastodons is post-flood. So how can you scrunch all of that into the frame? He couldn't quite figure out. I tried to ask him, what did the original horse aboard the Ark look like? And he sounded kind of like maybe there were 2, but he didn't go into too many details. And you could just see him towing out on the diving board and noticing that he doesn't have any water in the pool under him, and so he's got to come back to pick up his more familiar talking points.
So what did he have to say about the mastodon situation with their slow generation time?
We just barely. I alluded to it, and we didn't get a chance to get into it. I was hoping there was going to be like a post end at the thing where we would have been able to carry on that, but James had to go off and do stuff, and so that was kind of pegged in at a little after 8 o'clock. He actually stayed longer than I was expecting him to. So we didn't get into that part, but we did get into the horse part. And the fact that the horse, we've got the awful problem. Oh, and by the way, he's aware of Wood and company accepting that the horse barrowman is a one big monobarrowman. So I think he knows this data field. He can't step outside of it to try to take stands. He would constantly bring up what other creationists had written on the subject, and then I would say, "But what do you think? What is your view?" Because he actually earlier in the show made the mistake of saying, I don't want to hear what James says about the science work. I want to hear what he thinks. And I say that works both ways, Standing, that I want to know what you think.
No,
and
I think that
boy, there's not much there.
No, I mean that is completely fair. I wonder too.
He has no map of time in his head.
Yeah, I wonder too if he has any idea how many settlements, both of humans, at least of sapiens, and maybe even Heidelbergensis, we're not sure yet, are composed of just dozens upon dozens of materials that have basically are used to be mammoths, mammoths and mastodons. And if he's putting all of that mastodon and mammoth hunting post flood, then you've got to have some wild gestation times that you're just pulling out of a hat to explain where we got all these parts from. And that's null and voiding the entirety
in that gestation period thing, I explicitly asked him how many people were being generated, and he talked about the doubling time, and he immediately appealed to other people who had done analyses that had calculated how you'd only take so many centuries to be able to get so many people and so forth. But I had done my little spreadsheet where I explained that you've got, if you hypothesize that every single woman, including Mrs. Noah, giving birth to one child a year on clockwork, with children from 15 on giving birth, and they keep doing it for decades, in which case they're going way into old age, and they're still pumping out one child a year, and that they average a girl as 50 times, and each one of them, as soon as they get to penis, pumping them out. Yes, you can generate lots of people that way, but they're horribly incestuous. Where in a really short period of time, the vast majority of the people on the planet Earth are incestuous. And now you've got a terrible problem that kind of thing is going to show up in the genes if all of this is taking place so recently. You couldn't avoid it. And I've never seen Jensen or anybody else offer any indication of that level. He talks about the Neanderthals with their inbreeding. Holy moly, does he have any idea what Noah and the kids would have been doing?
So in addition to that, I want to add something on that has been kind of bonking around in my brain like a DVD screensaver for a couple of years now. But that population doubling time that they used to rapidly fill up the Earth's human population size right after the flood, something would have had to happen. Some event would have had to happen to interrupt that rate and change it to the rate that we see in medieval times, in Egyptian times, in Roman times, in Greek times, where there's this wickedly high infant mortality rate, et cetera, et cetera. But there is no proposed mechanism. Why did
you don't have huge population growths?
No, because you don't. I'm saying if you're going to invoke a rapid population growth to get all the people you need to build Giza, right?
Yeah.
Then what's happening after that to cause it to slow down so much?
Yeah, it's as if what?
And he sort of bypassed another.
Have a role.
Oh, go ahead, TD.
Yeah,
plus genetic entropy is not a thing.
Infant mortality very much without C-section basically, and modern medicine.
Wait,
so either you have to invoke that these ancient civilizations were able to do advanced medical procedures that we can do right now, or what? Magic?
Wait, have we considered the option that they had advanced C-section technology and also use it on the Proboscideans to get all of those Proboscideans all over the Earth?
There we go.
There's a question too. Okay, so like I've said,
just joined us.
Oh hey,
we have a goblin in chat.
A wild goblin.
Early post-flood life used spores to propagate out of the dirt.
Naturally.
Oh, like the Uruk-hai from that scene in Lord of the Rings where they claw out of the weird sacks in the ground.
Yep,
checks out.
Yeah, which I'm pretty sure was actually entirely movie.
Well, that would be consistent with created heterozygosity.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
buzzword.
And men just kind of pull the fish thing. They just kind of walk around and just kind of spread their seed around on the ground, and life was just springing forth.
Springing forth, of course. That is, you really do.
That would certainly make for an interesting movie.
I mean, that's basically most ancient Egyptian creation myths.
Yeah, the ancient Egyptians were a little more pornographic.
A little more?
I'm on Dapper's channel. I'm playing nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no pixel art boobs, please.
But at one point I asked Standing, or basically posed to him the idea that when he talked about transitional forms and supposedly the absence of them, so basically you don't allow there to be transitional forms. You don't allow any evidence that actually will conflict with your viewpoint in principle. And he kind of squiggled on that.
Oh, surprise,
He
surprise.
would have to. He kind of can't,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because if he does, then you just screwed. It's like when somebody gets super attached to being correct, or they build their YouTube or whatever career off of one piece of information or one idea, and they're just pushing that idea. If you bring in anything that's conflicting, whether it be a piece of evidence, whether it be logic, whether like in philosophy, or it abrupts or disrupts your entire position, then, and you've built your life on this position, you start running into problems. That person does, at least.
And educational people have to get around this fact that information barrages tend to just drive kids to circle the wagons and not really go beyond that.
Right.
So I want to give a quick example of the transitional forms thing, because I've been mulling that around in my brain since Standing brought it up the first time with me quite some time ago. You know, the whole amphibious vehicle thing. We design amphibious vehicles.
Yeah,
so
what a lame example.
You just also happened to mention that. I have a note here from my notes on what I said about that. Because a question actually mentioned, APCs. Why are you using this? And RJ made the note, APCs don't reproduce.
So how are we able to
SFT
predict which transitional amphibious vehicle was made in which factory at which time? Because that's what we're actually doing.
No,
Exactly, yes.
it is.
But also, he just said reproduction makes things more difficult for transitional species, apparently.
Although
Go
technically
figure.
speaking, cladeism could be used quite effectively to sort through and determine the likely, air quotes, lineage, but in fact the manufacturing history of designed objects like automobiles. Niles Eldritch uses the example of cornets because he plays the cornet, that sort of thing. And the irony is that with designed objects, if you try to use cladistic analysis on them, you will not find coherent nested hierarchies.
Yeah.
Because ideas can be copied, like intermittent windshield wipers on automobiles can be copied over what would be way beyond lateral gene transfer. It's just, copying. That's
really good
exactly
point.
what you
Those
don't
are really
find
good
in life.
analogy,
Yeah, and actually, so
Okay.
full disclosure, I did not actually see very much of the debate because myself, Cheshire, and Erica were all on
Busy.
Cheshire Vic's channel answering
Hello.
the final 30 questions for atheists that were more questions for stereotyped anti-theists than they were questions for atheists, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the parts that I did see where he was like, oh, you can resolve nested hierarchies for automobiles. I was like, no, you can't. The things you can unambiguously resolve nested hierarchies for are living organisms, languages, and ancient texts with a sufficient corpus, like the Bible. You can actually find a manuscript nested hierarchy for biblical texts because we have so many copies and because they share
We actually
descent.
talked about that. We
Exactly.
talked about that on the second part too. We were talking about that, and we were talking about what your super chat is just on part 3 earlier today.
Yep, Anamorphic Mind for 2 says, I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Joking.
Yeah, you can find the same thing with history of playing cards, because I collect those. So there's any of those things, and all of those are designed objects, but they don't show the kinds of specific features. Trilobites, I had a thing in my old tip where I went into trilobite eyes. The fact is that only one particular lineage had those amazing facopid eyes. It's a single lineage, and then another group that went completely blind. What did they, or were they a little bit short to get to the giving away eye game that God was doing?
They were insufficiently devout in their praising of God.
There we go. Yeah,
I got an idea I want to toss out to you guys. You can let me know. I can't stay for long, so I just want to toss this out, and then I'll probably get out of your hair.
Hair?
Blossom and Vileplume aren't the same thing, but they both evolved from gloom.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Chef, that's called convergent evolution. So let me throw my hands up.
So you're saying that you're saying that Vileplume, but then how are they both still Vileplume, and how are they both still blossoms?
They share a common ancestor.
No, hold on. Yeah, gloom under different natural pressures a sunstone, right, for Blossom, will take upon different forms based on the stimulus that it's being exposed to externally.
And is sexual selection going to play a role here as well?
Potentially, we don't know what the male Vileplumes and male Blossoms are into.
And assuming
there are ones that are like that though. So if you want to hit up Nidoking and Nidoqueen,
that's a good point.
Or if you want to hit newer Pokemon, you can hit the Meowtics.
They could be like fungi, and they got like 5 sexes.
By the way, we have for $4.99 from Vandalia 1998. Here's money to stop doing. Let me start over. Here's money to stop doing after shows when I'm at work, winky face. We'll try to catch the rerun later between people. Or between people. Thank you, Vandalia 1998. I'm sorry, but I mean, it's got to be fairly soon after the show. Otherwise, what's the point? So tell Modern Day Debate to start scheduling debates so that there's enough time for you to watch the debate and the after show before work. That's what you really have to hit up is Modern Day Debate.
Yeah, while you're
you know what the highlight of this debate was actually James doing some actual moderation because it got that heated.
Ooh.
Oh wow!
I missed a good portion of it. How heated did it get?
I gotta take off, so I'm gonna have to watch it later. But
bye, Chash.
Have a good night, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Bye. Night, Chash. Standing interrupted more than I did.
Oh yeah, Standing was interrupting a lot. RJ was trying to get his piece in, albeit I will say he did interrupt Standing occasionally. But that was because Standing was asking the same question over.
Yeah, he was napping.
And over. And over.
And I'm going to give the same answer I did before. Why are you asking me this question?
Yeah, because it's a presuppositional question that RJ doesn't agree with.
By the way, guys, for $10, we have from Just a Walking Fish. Hey, RJ and Dapper, thank y'all so much for the shoutouts. I've been waiting for you two to be in the same room, but they really did mean a lot. And you know what? Just a Walking Fish has recently released his first video on YouTube, and I really liked it. It's about I don't want to give too much away, but it has to do with genetic entropy and why that is not such a great hypothesis for creationists. So I would heavily encourage you to check it out. I think I have it in my, I think it's on my clipboard, so I'm going to try and paste it. So yeah, that should be Just Walking Fish's channel. If you guys haven't seen him, which given that he has fewer subscribers than we have in chat, I know most of you haven't, go check him out. If you like the video,
you do. It's pretty good.
It was a nicely thought out video and very concise.
Yeah, it's excellent. Give him a like, give him a subscription if you think that's the kind of thing you want to see. And I'm fairly confident that if you're here, you'll find that interesting. So yeah, go give Just a Walking Fish your support because he's one of my subscribers. I liked his video, and technically this $10 is not paying me for this because I shouted him out before he paid me, and we didn't have a prior agreement. So take that.
Yeah, maybe we should put that in repeat for SFT.
Yeah. I need a shout out list on my channel as well. So I want to touch on something really fast though. So the whole transitional nested hierarchy deal that they claim that they predicted when really it's just completely a retrodiction. So it doesn't even really work conceptually either, right? So what do we have, right? Let's say we're comparing a car and a plane and then like a plane car, right? So the plane car being representative, I don't know, Tiktaalik or something like that. So we don't have anything like a plane car, though, where it mostly drives or it mostly flies, but then it has semi-useless wheels or semi-useless wings. But we find that all the time in nature. We find vestigial structures which don't exist in design.
What about gliders that can taxi for extended periods of time?
They're still not vestigial because the gliders are actually still using the wheels. I'm talking about like halteres on certain species of hymenopterans where they're literally just vestigial wing nubs. Why are they there?
I'm so happy I understood all of those words despite the alcohol.
Yeah, listen, I'm teetering myself. I feel there are plenty of examples of wild animals that have, or plants for that matter, that have structures that, as far as we know, are either vestigial and useless or they're atavistic. So where do those fit into this amphibious vehicle or this plane car or whatever?
Yeah, he doesn't get to that level. And
Yeah,
the thing about actual transitional forms, the bird example is one of the most fascinating one, because the whole argument that was about where bird wings come from, that's the creationist trope, what good is half a wing? The actual bird evolution turned out to never involve a half wing.
Right.
It involved an organism that had long arms that could do every motion that flapping does. And because they also had feathers, eventually they start having aerodynamic feathers, and the rest is flappy, flappy.
Yeah. Yeah, the closest you can say to, oh, it's half a wing, is you can say when finger fusion begins. But before finger fusion begins, you're already using the wings to at least glide and usually fly.
And they know a lot of the genetics of those bone fusions and that too, because they can work out from the good old chicken and other bits. Of which, again, the thing that really frosts my balls, and don't think about that too much, is
keep
that
it PG-13, man.
Yeah, exactly. Is the idea that the Standing for Truth is trotting out this extremely narrow blob of creationist apologetics that literally you could gather all of them in a Holiday Inn meeting room and have spare seats. Whereas the actual scientific community in any of the disciplines that they're bumping into would need a bloody stadium. And there's so much work out there, and their total inability to make any headway in that larger field is for a simple reason, because it's wrong.
You know, so I just had a thought, and I want to get other people's opinion on this. So when I was a young Earth creationist, and we're going back a little ways now, though, there was the main arguments tend to be things like, oh, there are no transitional fossils, and you can't get genetic information to increase, and whatnot. But it seems like when we're at the point where Standing for Truth is, he has backed off both the claim that there simply aren't any reasonable transitional fossils, and I know because he told me directly that he thought that genetic information could increase, because I suggested that we debate the topic. So it seems like he's just gone back into not even really making claims so much as just saying, oh, well, you know, if I'm allowed infinite or post hoc rationalizations, then creationism could still be true. Is that an inaccurate assessment?
I'd say you are rather correct on that.
Okay.
As he hand waved away Australopithecines in his opening, as you might know, Dapper, and later in his closing, basically, he said he refuted them, which he never did.
Maybe he refuted them the same way that the Creation Museum did, by basically just lying.
Yeah. SFT's argument falls into what I call the jujitsu class. It's one where they want to have the slam dunk. All you need to do is to get this point across, and you have got your game. So all you need to do is to prove that mitochondrial DNA issue, or the chromosome 2 issue, or whatever the little talking points are, which is why he keeps repeating them all the time. And if you accept that premise, then boop, all done. And he doesn't have to think anymore about it. It's the exact opposite of what real people in the sciences do, where they are looking at the broad data field, trying to gain every single scrap of information and to work out. And it's even before hypothesis testing. If you really look at the sophisticated ones, you do have people who eventually have access to GRIME, but they're actually, most of the ones are saying, let's find out what the data are, and then we'll try to figure out what this is telling us. They're trying to find out what nature is saying to us, rather than simply ramming it into a presupposition. So, Erica, he kept on going on about whether or not the mutation rates in mitochondria are fixed or not. And I go, who cares? That it will be whatever it is, although the last I've heard is that they're arguing, at least in humans, it looks like that the mutation rate is actually kind of dropped down in human beings and the primates, that a lot of them have much more aggressive mutation rates than we do.
Listen, RJ, I'm going to make a very bold claim here and say that after my last conversation with Standing for Truth, if he had found any support or evidence that mutation rates were in fact constant, or that there was a reason to think that mutation rates in nuclear or mitochondrial DNA was constant, given how back and forth we went in our conversation on MDD, I would think he would have made a video about it by now. So I think that he was asking you that just to see if he could maybe get an edge on that question, despite the fact that he and I had already had that conversation.
See, the best you could do is that if you imagine a roller coaster where mutation rates can naturally fluctuate between one rate and another. And if they get too low, then you don't have enough mutations to drive much evolution and it goes extinct. And if you have it too high, you start having all sorts of malfunctions. And so it's going to cycle within perhaps a range. And the most you might be able to do is to come up with kind of a generic average that, especially if you think of it over, instead of 1 million years, 100 million years, or 1 billion years, that you can use it as a rough heuristic to be able to work your way through analyzing what variations that you're seeing at the genetic level. And anyone can correct me if they've got a different interpretation of that, but that's what I see the tendency is when they talk about a generic mutation rate, that it's just kind of an average and a rule of thumb.
RJ,
when
oh, sorry.
But it's hilarious.
Yeah, go ahead.
You just gave a better justification for a constant mutation rate than Jensen himself, whose only argument for why it should be constant was geologists do it with rocks, astronomers do it with light. Why can't I do it here?
For many reasons.
Absolutely dead serious, though, for those of you out there who are wondering. In his book, Replacing Darwin, that is the exact reasoning that Nathaniel Jeanson, PhD, uses to justify a constant mutation rate.
No data from the
that
field,
doesn't
nothing. It
seem
was,
proper.
you do it so I can.
RJ, I just want to say one quick thing.
Yeah.
One quick thing for you, RJ. I try not to correct people who have already used the word heuristic in a sentence correctly, because that's unusual. So that's once you do that, I'm like, nah, this guy probably knows what he's talking about. He used heuristic correctly. I barely even do that.
Rule of thumb. Yeah, what can you do? And there's some things that in principle can't be other than that. One of the examples that I like to think about, because I have a mathematics training, for up until my second college year, I was a dual history and math major. In retrospect, I go, was I nuts? But at any rate, I finally reached the stage where higher level matrices were frying my brain, and I kind of stopped it. But along the way, you'll discover that there are things in mathematics that are unresolvable in principle, that literally it's physically impossible. No God can write out a root formula for a fifth-degree polynomial. It's not just hard, it's impossible in principle. And so you've got things, if you imagine a system that is involving things that are fifth-degree polynomial elements or things that have nonlinear characteristics, you're now into a foggy zone where you lose the ability to be precise unless you can have absolute knowledge, and you can't get that in the real world. So now you have you lose a level of control, even though you can get a generic element going, in the same way that you can be reasonably confident here in Spokane that it's not going to be snowing in July. Although it's not absolutely impossible to imagine a set of circumstances where a cold snap can bring stuff down from the Arctic and you might actually get a little bit of snow in July, but it's really not likely. And all of that are heuristics. Weather forecasting is a perfectly fine example of it. I don't know whether Standing has gotten to the level of thinking that there's a degree of accuracy in any of this argument that is good enough to resolve the kind of questions he wants to resolve.
Well, I think an important thing to note is just what you said, right? Like, in Standing's view, the fact that we have any kind of constant in mathematics or physics, for that matter, like, oh, I don't know, radiometric dating or the radioactive decay law, it absolutely just does not, it seems to not compute with him, or he just disagrees with a fact of reality, which I don't understand, because and you'll know, if I'm sure some of you guys saw my last conversation with him, but he really did not want to have that conversation about radiometric dating. And to the point that he was like, oh, well, let's have it on a conversation about it another time. And I think that's because it's very, very understandably, of course, it's a monumentous task to argue with what is essentially just a rule of reality on our planet.
And yet it's implicit in his young Earth creationist position. In that respect, he was a lot like Duane Gish, because everybody who ever debated Duane Gish discovered that even though he believed radiometric dating was wrong and that the Earth was young, he really didn't like talking about it. He was not a geologist. It was out of his wheelhouse. So he would veer away from it as much as possible and would just touch upon it and kind of allude you to Henry Morse and then move on. And I think Standing is in that same area, that you can probe the kind of areas that he's reluctant to deal with. I'm not a geneticist, so and I don't this may shock everybody. I do not remember every effing paper that I've ever read right off the bat.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that
RJ.
seems unlikely. I'm gonna press F to doubt.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, you were able to name actually your sources though.
Well, I had a bunch of them here that I could drop because, and again, Gutsick, you were just absolutely delightful in the prepping on that too, and warning me that I needed to have some things that I could deal with in terms of the various populations and the mutations involved in that, because he was going to bring that damn stuff up. I wanted to avoid walking down that little path with him because I knew it was going to be a perpetual around and around and around the mulberry bush. So I tried to maneuver off of it as quickly as I could. And it took me like 20 minutes to finally get him to try to answer my damn questions about the New World. And even then, he couldn't get into it. There's no there in his head.
I genuinely, I don't find that surprising just based off of the conversations that I've had with Standing. And again, I want to emphasize this. All my conversations with him have been quite pleasant. I haven't seen your exchange with him tonight, but
he's actually quite jovial.
He really is.
When he isn't trying to defend the material and going kind of semi-neffy, he's perfectly pleasant.
He really genuinely is, and that's why, you know, I stress quite frequently that it's like, it's not Standing that I have an issue with, it's what he's kind of proposing. It's his data, I suppose.
Yeah, I have to agree. I've had a few interactions with Standing, and none of them have been unpleasant, which is something that I cannot say for every creationist that I've interacted with.
Absolutely. Well, and RJ, I'm really glad that you found that helpful. I've had 3+ conversations with Standing. And those tend to be the things that are brought up: mitochondrial Eve, Y chromosomal Adam, the Y chromosomal what's the word I'm looking for? Not speciation rate, divergence, the Y chromosomal divergence between humans and chimps. He likes that one too. He loves ZRVs. He loves all the genetic stuff that I have found that Jeanson also talks about.
We had a sort of a fist fight going verbally because of the issue about it's not a problem to imagine that endogenous retroviruses can do things in regulation, because we know they do those. The question is, are they not still viruses, and can they still not be dangerous? And he would just run like a rabbit from the issue, were any of the bad things designed? Because that's a paradigm of creationism, that even though they everything is the catch-all fall. And even the intelligent designers functionally kind of think that none of the bad things could actually be the designer's fault.
No, absolutely. I mean, AIG has entire articles dedicated to, were there thorns in the Garden of Eden? Which I'm like, imagine being.
Oh yeah, we mentioned that in the rocks were there, because the thorn example comes up. And my favorite one that I put in to contribute is they're trying to argue that cholera is a kind of nice beneficial thing, and that it only became unpleasant because it was no longer operating to dissolve shellfish shells in the ocean. And that involved a colossally stupid argument.
Wait, was it beneficial back when it was just dissolving shellfish shells? Because I feel like the shellfish would have liked that their shells remain intact.
Yeah. And so the argument was, I love the misplaced concreteness of this. The argument was that if it weren't for cholera, all of the little shells would pile up so much that we'd be up to our armpits in undissolved shells if the Earth were billions of years old. That was the kind of the argument on it. Yeah, right. The problem is other things can do that. And the idea that you can only have a cholera form that would do the dissolving, that you couldn't use anything else to do that. And then the element is that, can't you put in like a safeguard to make sure that it doesn't cause disease, because it actually causes illnesses in fish. So even in the aquatic environment, it's a problem. And it wasn't difficult to find this information. I can't remember whether it was Minton or somebody else that was fielding this argument. No, it was a minor league guy. It was a little trivial one, but I think it was at AIG. And your mouth drops at that kind of an argument.
So I want to address something quickly. So Drew Rayford in the chat says which I'm not certain, I haven't scrolled up high enough yet, but I'm assuming it's either standing or perhaps one of the SFT brain trust. But he's put it in the side chat. He said the last debate he had with Erica proved creation. Rawmat told me that Erica conceded that the mutation rates prove creation, and we, SFT and Rawmat, are correct. Response. So, hello, Drew Rayford. No, that did not happen. I definitely, I find that very concerning, actually. I've taken a little screenshot of the sort of comment section just now so I could pick Rawmat and SFT's brain on why they're going around saying that I've conceded that at all. This seemed to have come up in the debate as well. At least that's what, I think that's what Colton said, or Colton said.
Yeah, SFT basically said that you admit that there was no predictions on my mtDNA slowdown.
Yeah,
this seems like the kind of thing that might be a new video on Erica's channel featuring some of our panel members.
I would be down for that.
Yeah, I think that does seem quite relevant to talking about.
If you don't address or refute his point that's a false thing to begin with, that you do nothing other than simply point out that it's a wrong point to begin with, then somehow or other he's won and you've lost and conceded.
Well, but the interesting thing about this one, RJ, is that I didn't do either of those things. What I said in our conversation with, I believe this is on Modern Day Debate, what I said to him was, I don't know the predictions that were made. I have no idea. And then I said, but I would wager that the predictions that have been made are unlikely to come to fruition anytime soon, given we're dealing with vast amounts of time. So I do find that a bit concerning, a bit disingenuous that Rawmat is kind of sowing these.
Well, I think he may have majored in disingenuous in college.
Yeah, it's disingenuous and borderline lying.
But is it more or less disingenuous than giving at least 3 different lengths for a particular horn that may or may not be a Triceratops horn?
From our doctor.
I don't know.
If it's worth mentioning, Erica, I'm pretty sure Rational Mind on his blog has, in one of his Genesen articles, has a list of a few studies that were doing like time-dependent slowdown predictions, not in primates, but I think there was one in penguins and there was like one in something else. And those predictions were confirmed. So that might be worth taking a look at. It looks like at least some have been checked out and have come out correct.
Oh, listen, you guys know one of my favorite things in the world is to do a literature deep dive on topics that I have been accused of getting incorrect.
Well, this isn't even about getting incorrect. This is them lying and saying that you actually conceded that not just you don't have an answer, but that their point and model is correct.
Yeah, I listened to that debate. And I don't remember that happening. In fact, I don't know if there are any...
That's shitty to say.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any Guts at Gibbon debates that I've missed. I mean, there are some that I didn't catch live, but I'm pretty sure I've listened to all of them at the very least. And I don't remember you conceding any of the debates that you've had.
No, it doesn't even seem like they're proposing a concession of the debate, but rather a specific topic that then Rawmat has kind of run with. Rawmat has become not the biggest fan of mine. I've noticed that he, I read somewhere in the comments at one point that I was accused of lying about something, which I've never done intentionally.
Erica, what did you do to Rawmat? Did you kick his puppy or something?
I think I think he didn't like that time that in the most recent response video I was very appreciative of him kind of giving me a backhanded compliment. But I guess we'll find out. I'm kind of skimming over that Modern Day Debate comment section now. We'll see what we find. I'll be interested to see precisely what's being said.
Yeah, maybe somebody just stuck a broom up Rawmat's, but who knows?
Who knows what's going on over at the what would be the equivalent of the SFT Bat Cave?
Erica, I've got the exact quote here from Rational Mind's blog regarding the time-dependent slowdown and the predictions.
Would you say that for the audience? And 2, would you send that to me on Twitter?
Yes, I would. So he says this model can continue to be tested, for example, with studies estimating mutation rates by calibrating medium-term events known from archaeology. If the estimated mutation rates falling on that curved line in figures 5 and 6, this is further support for the time-dependent rate slowdown hypothesis. For example, consider the results of Ryukes et al. 2014. They estimated mutation rates using calibration points of ancient DNA sequences that were independently dated between 2,500 and 64,500 years old. Not only did their overall estimated mtDNA mutation rate come out to a value intermediate between the fast rate from pedigree studies and the slow rate from more ancient divergences, but they also observed a time-dependent trend within their own data set. And he quotes them here as saying, quote, "We observed a subtle but significant negative linear correlation between the age of the ancient sequence used for calibration and the substitution rate estimate, which is consistent with our predictions." So, yeah, predictions have been done on this slowing down thing, and they've come out correct.
I wonder too, when was that paper done?
That was 2014.
2014. That seems
and
that
he's quotes two others of fulfilled predictions of this from 2008 and 2009, as well as one from 2006.
Yeah, I'll want to check on that too, so you can put that in the same feed where you get the information to Gutsick there. Isn't information exchange fun?
It's for
I just find it weird that he's saying that there are no predictions, and he knows of Evograd stuff. Presumably he's read all the rebuttals to replacing Darwin because he thinks he's debunked them. And this stuff is mentioned in there. So I don't know if he's somehow thinks he's debunked these as being fulfilled predictions of the slowdown hypothesis.
I think he isn't aware of them because he's
that would be my thought.
Of the apologetics. Remember, there's only a handful of people who are making these arguments, and he's repeating their talking points with great stenography skill, but not much detail examination.
Oh, and you can tell when he gets off of his comfort zone, like, say, the platypus.
Oh, the platypus! He brought up the platypus.
Yes.
Hey guys, one real quick, right before we get into the platypus, I have a quick super chat I want to read out. It's for $1.99 US from Vandalia 1998, who says, "Dapper versus Erica, best tetrapod. Schedule it."
Done. I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready for that. But really quickly though, for those of you watching out there in the space of the internet, and for the panel members, I thought you'd be delighted to know that I just found a paper from 2019 titled "The Estimated Pacemaker for Great Ape Supports the Hominoid Slowdown Hypothesis." Isn't that
what a surprise?
That one.
Sorry, I missed that one. Heard everyone was saying. I'm putting it in the Twitter now.
Nice.
But don't you know, Erica? Don't you know, RJ? These are just one-off accidental predictions that aren't specific at all.
Yeah. So, TD, your notes on the platypus.
Okay, so there was a question which asked, why are there not animals that defy nested hierarchies, i.e. griffins, to SFT? SFT uses the platypus and says it has almost reptilian features completely unironically.
No, it has amniote features. All right, hold on. I'm gonna go on mute for a second here, or I'm gonna be upset.
Explode?
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
He
My
repeats the damn duckbill aspect.
Note here is RJ beats him over the head on this because you did. Because SFT was completely wrong.
Yeah, he repeated the trope, and this goes easily back to the Dwayne Gish era. So it's one that percolates through the creationist literature, and they don't really do much changing on it. It's a duck bill because it looks like a duck. It's got a little duck bill, just like the duck beak. It's not a beak like a bird. It has a superficial resemblance to a duck bill, but in fact, it's a fleshy piece of skin that is built from completely different dynamics. Nobody could ever confuse the two. Plus, we got a huge amount of information on the biology of monotremes and how they fit into the development of everything from the immune system to the pre-things about the thing that eventually is leading off to the mammalian suckling and placental issues and stuff. There's just a vast literature in this area that doesn't ever show up in the creationist literature. Therefore, Standing doesn't know about it, but I alluded to it in Slam Dunk, and we also brought the platypus up in The Rocks Were There. But this is not because you're going to find it in the creationist literature.
Yeah, using the platypus as a nested hierarchy breaker is completely moronic because it's not.
In fact, if we had to have any example of the problems that it's Richard Owen, who was a typological thinker in the stripe of an awful lot of creationists. He thought it was a hoax. He couldn't believe that there was such an actual animal.
Richard Owen is kind of he's something of a meme in like early science in general, which is just a blast.
Oh, Huxley had such a field day with him. Oh, they got into such big hissy fit, knockdown, dragouts. And he was a little bit of an arrogant fellow. He was not unskilled in many areas, but nonetheless, he had his blind spots.
Oh, yeah.
He was the most brilliant paleontologist of the day,
So
yeah.
One thing that bugs me about the whole monotremes, especially the platypus, defy the nested hierarchy, right? Is the only way to come up with a platypus being like a reptile is if you focus on plesiomorphic characteristics for amniotes, basically. All you can say about monotremes is, hey, they have relatively few derived characteristics compared to other mammals. Well, great, but you know what doesn't make you outside of the hierarchy? Having plesiomorphic character traits. A plesiomorphy, for those who don't know, because it's a weird term, right, is the ancestral characteristic that a clade shares. So, for instance, one of the defining characteristics of monotremes is that they lay eggs. Well, that's the ancestral character trait for amniotes as a whole. They lay a shelled egg with an amnion. Another one is that they only have one orifice through which they do all their waste excretion as well as the reproductive activities, called the cloaca. That is a primitive trait to tetrapods. So none of this actually brings them outside of that, because it's not something that we would expect to find as like ruled out inside Mammalia as a whole. The fact that we hadn't found it up until, or the fact that European scientists hadn't found it up until Europeans started, getting into Australia, doesn't mean that they couldn't have found it elsewhere with it still fitting in that. If we happen to have even more primitive mammal-like organisms in South America, we just didn't happen to, but if that had happened, it still wouldn't have broken the hierarchy. In order to break the hierarchy, you need to have something that is basically a synapomorphy, which is a derived trait shared by a certain group, that you find in a group that isn't actually another group that isn't actually part of that. So if the duck-billed platypus had had no kidding feathers, or if they had had, let's say that they had had like chelicerae, like a spider or a scorpion or horseshoe crab or something like that is actually characteristic and derived in another group, then that would have violated it. But pointing to primitive characteristics in any group is not a violation of the hierarchy. It's pretty easy to figure out what a violation of the nested hierarchy would be.
Yeah. And
plesiomorphies just aren't it.
And the problem is that this is a common trait amongst an awful lot of kind of the interloper anti-evolutionism, even all the way up to the Michael Denton level, where he would repeat over in Intelligent Design, he would repeat the trope that, your convergence doesn't really mean anything because of the marsupial wolf versus the placental wolf. Well, it doesn't. They're really easy to tell apart when you look at the anatomy close up. I mean, I'm not a super duper expert in that, but I could spot the differences, including the number of molars.
I mean, even if you're, especially like if you're looking at a skeleton, it's fairly obvious, right? Because you're going to have some of the odd characteristics of Australian marsupials. But if you're looking at a flesh and blood specimen, it's going to be even more obvious. Hey, the thylacine has a pouch, at least in the females. That's going to be unusual. And while I want to keep this mostly PG-13, male reproductive organs in marsupials are significantly different from male reproductive organs in placental mammals. So you could check there too. I'll just say one thing. There's a bit of a Y shape going distally in most marsupials that you find in Australia. But we also have a $4.99 super chat from Vandalia 1998, not 1999. What am I talking about? Who says, even if Owen was a creationist, would he call YEC morons today? Yes, he would.
Yes.
Yeah, because he was okay with the geology of the time.
Yeah, he did not reject geology, and he was a progressive creationist. So he thought that God created successive faunal groups that he would replace at certain intervals. They were irregular intervals, but yeah.
And we were able to test this out because his notion of the archetype is an awful lot like the kind of thing that Michael Denton is trying to revive in Intelligent Design and some of the notions that grassroots creationists have. But we know how absolutely useless this was in paleontology and systematics. It just went nowhere.
Yeah.
And the evolutionary paleontologists were the ones that made sense out of stuff and anticipated stuff and predicted things and did the field work and made sense out of it. And so anybody that had that vague archetypal way of looking at things bogged down because they were never able to make sense out of anything.
Well, you know, my favorite Owen's prediction is while he was going on railing about how Archaeopteryx, which had recently been discovered, wasn't really very much like a dinosaur, because one of the things we forget is that the birds are dinosaurs idea was actually pretty current around the time of like late in Darwin's life and during a big part of Owen's career.
It was contemporary in the 1860s. Huxley wrote on the subject too.
It fell out of favor to some degree later on, and it's then seen a resurgence in the last few decades with exceptionally good data. But Richard Owen, in order to counter this idea, because he didn't think that there could be any connection between the warm-blooded, kind, and good-hearted avians and the cold-blooded, evil reptiles, he went on and said, I'm very sure that when we find a skull for this animal, which hadn't been found at the time, that it will be a perfectly normal bird skull with a non-toothed beak. And then not that long later, they found a different specimen with a fairly complete skull, and lo and behold, it had a very dinosaurian snout with, a fairly small premaxilla and full of sharp little teeth. So that's a fun one.
Just to put a cherry on top of the picking, that 2 of the Archaeopteryx specimens in the Solnhofen were initially misinterpreted as dinosaurs.
Yep, specifically Compsognathus.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you'll see in Jurassic Park 2 if you watch that movie.
Yes, there's the little teeny pack hunters that were attacking the guy when he went to go take a leak or something.
Yeah. Although I think one of them also in the there's a cold open to the movie. Like, it opens with a family taking a break on an island from their yacht or something. I think their first victim is like they attack a little girl, and I think they save the little girl, but that's the first thing that happens. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Anyway, they make terrible house pets.
Yes, and they were also probably fluffy, not scaly.
Aww.
Yeah.
So cute.
Yeah.
Like tiny
Although,
little.
to be fair, the one that's found in the Solnhofen doesn't apparently have feather impressions.
I'm sorry, say that again. I missed the first part.
I don't think the Compsognathus in the Solnhofen has feather impressions.
No,
and I know the one with the French one, which is there are literally only 2 Compsognathus fossils, as far as I know. The one in France, I don't think is a Lagerstätten level, so it's just the bones.
So even if we lack, though, the feather impressions, we know it has a semi-lunate carpal, which suggests, like, it. I don't know. So typically in evolution, right, like behavior will precede morphology. And so if we've got, like, if we're going with one of the many hypotheses that feathers are either for display or, in my opinion, slightly less likely, but insulation, the fact that the semi-lunate carpal is showing up on Compsognathus perhaps suggests, or at least, makes a baseline case that maybe we were having some kind of display feather or down.
Well, and to be fair, it's an incomplete fossil, so it's not full. They don't have certain areas of it to look at. And also, several of the Archaeopteryx, which nobody doubts, has extremely thin feather impressions. They're very faint. So not all of them are like the Berlin and the London specimen that are just so wow. An awful lot of them were misidentified precisely because the feather impressions were so faint. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Compsognathus had some feather elements that either weren't preserved in what was in the bones or were so fuzzy light that they didn't make it into the preservation.
But RJ, don't be ridiculous. We know that those feathers are, it's just collagen, even though we can get colors from it, and we can...
Yes, fiducia!
But here's the even crazier one. So Fred Hoyle and some other guy, he went with...
Lee Spetner.
Lee Spetner, you're right. They went with Archaeopteryx as a hoax created by pressing chicken feathers into wet cement that was placed on top of the fossil. They based this basically on the grounds of they took bad grainy photographs of the fossil.
And that got blown to smithereens back in the 1980s, but Kent Hovind was still trotting it out in 2019.
Yeah, as far as I know, he hasn't backed off of that one, that Archaeopteryx was a fake. But the weird thing is he also goes into why, even if it wasn't a fake, it doesn't matter anyway, because it was just a bird. It's like,
and we couldn't tell if it had babies.
So pick one. Was it a dinosaur that they faked to look like a bird, or was it just a bird? You gotta pick.
Of course, have over a dozen specimens now. In fact, some of them are in fact classified as a separate species. They're that divergent from the original Archaeopteryx lithographica.
Yeah, and I personally fall into it was with feathers. It was probably both display and insulation, because obviously with sexual dimorphism, displays are going to occur, and we see a lot of sexual dimorphism in birds, but feathers are also very good as insulation. Yeah. So it could have been both in similar time frame.
Well, we don't. So we know that in modern birds, right, feathers perform three main functions. There's display, there's insulation, and then there's aerodynamics. We know that some dinosaurs were using pennaceous feathers for thermal regulation or incubation. One big example that's fairly famous is oviraptorosaurs. We know they were brooding young by using pennaceous feathers to cover the eggs. Now, what were the first feathers for? It's a bit hard to say, because one problem is it's not entirely clear how far back things that are homologous to feathers go, because we have ornithischians with feather-like filamentous integument.
Oh yeah, Psittacosaurus.
Yeah, Psittacosaurus is a big one, but there are actually a whole bunch of others too. In fact, there's even some indication that Triceratops may have had little quills.
Hey Dapper, one moment, quickly. Yeah. Two things. One, Unholy Roast says, Dapper, I hope for you and Gutsick everything goes well. I'm still very drunk.
Oh, well.
Also, for RJ, John Wick wanted to, because I've been kind of active.
Wait, the John Wick?
Yeah, it's the John Wick.
Wow.
He's taking a break from all of the revenge stuff.
Yeah, all the killing and revenge. Okay.
Yeah. But they wanted to ask RJ specifically that what did SFT mean about the cytochrome C protein with RJ? Can you ask RJ? I am so confused. RJ,
cytochrome C is a protein that has been a benchmark of creationist apologetics and intelligent design apologetics for years and years and years. And it came up a little bit with Duane Gish, and it certainly came up a lot with Michael Denton, where they argue that the kinds of variations between the cytochrome C and different organisms don't match up with the evolutionary phylogeny. And they have to, because it's such a fundamental component, that the idea that it's going to be varying in a lot of ways is really kind of unlikely. But even so, they tend to misrepresent what these things are, that you can in fact tell. And there's a whole bunch of other cytochromes other than just cytochrome C. So to know exactly which version of that argument Standing is using, it's hard to tell. I'd have to give him a reference on it, because it pops up in a lot of different areas. I'm more familiar with that Michael Denton stuff, and he's gotten a lot of criticism over the years. That was in Evolution, a Theory and Crisis, that was back in the 1980s. So the fact that he's bringing it out, I think there's a bit of newer material on it. And I'm trying to think whether it was Tompkins or somebody else who was kind of riffing off of it. Again, if I'd search through my reference bibliography to find out. But who knows where he's getting it from. But no, it's not a problem for evolution. And it's actually a fascinating thing because of the evolutionary origins of the various systems that cytochrome is involved in. And I think it's composed of like a bunch of little modules. And so there's a whole history about how that developed as well. And so anyway, that's as far as I can go on my memory.
Well, I want to quickly finish the last little thing I had about feathers and how far back they go and why they developed. And then I want to answer a question from Matthew. I'm going to go with Galliano, although I'm not positive it's not Galliano. So forgive me if I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. But one of the complicating factors is that so pycnofibers are a filamentous integumentary structure found on pterosaurs. So animals like, Pterodactylus and Pteranodon. Kind of and they were actually very fuzzy. But one of the weird little things is that in a fairly recent paper, there were described complex branching structures in pycnofibers in some of the best preserved pycnofibers ever found that were then examined with very, very powerful microscopes.
Some may have been a co-author on that paper, if memory serves me.
I don't remember.
Evolution guy.
But the question that raises is this an indication of homology, or is it an indication that there are certain aspects of ornithodyryn integument that makes it prone to having mutations that result in filamentous structures with branching patterns? And there's a lot of questions there, and because we don't have any extant pterosaurs or ornithischians to test these things on, it becomes really hard to say why the first filaments that are homologous to modern feathers developed. But Matthew does ask, what about feathers as protection from parasites? And I'm extremely skeptical of this because, as a rule, little sticky outy bits coming out of your skin simply provide places for parasites to both hide and latch onto.
Yeah. That's why they have to do so much grooming on it.
Yep.
I'm less worried about it because Alibardi's work and the various genetic things on the origin of both feather and hair structure, and that branch is completely outside of dinosaurs. They're using very similar genetic systems. They involve the bone morphological protein and my favorite gene, Sonic Hedgehog, and all of that. And so what you've got are Archosaurian placodes, the thing that eventually become scales and hair and feathers in these various lineages, involve pretty much the same dynamic system and then can go off in umpteen different directions.
Yeah.
So what we're probably seeing with pterosaurs and these various other integments are yet more variations on a theme that are going on there. Also, it's important to remember that Prum and Brush had literally worked out purely on developmental biology grounds what an evolutionary sequence of developing a proto-feathers would involve.
Yeah.
And it turns out that we actually have preserved proto-feather in amber from the Cretaceous, which means they were existing all the way into the Cretaceous period. We don't know whether it was from a bird or a flightless theropod, but the point is that these predicted transitional form has literally shown up where the fossil genie comes in again, supporting that evolution stuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's never been discussed as far as I know in the anti-evolution literature. Go figure.
Well, it's not surprising. The thing is that even though the fossils are probably the weakest evidence for evolution, by themselves, they're basically conclusive. And that's the weakest the evidence for common descent gets, is the fossils. And yet, I would take that and say just the fossil record makes it extremely difficult to come to any conclusion other than common descent. And then you add in the genetics and the modern morphologies and the observed instances of evolution and all of these other things and just the nested hierarchical pattern of extant organisms. And it's just like, anti-evolution really is on the level of flat Earth. It's just that the evidence is less well known to the general population in terms of, like, people know about ships going over the horizon and star trails in the southern hemisphere. But not as many people know about just how many transitional forms are on the fossil record, just how well predictions have been cross-confirmed between genetics and morphology and fossils. It's really hard.
I put it in Evolution Slam Dunk, if God didn't want me to believe in evolution, he shouldn't have created therapsids. That was a big mistake.
Yeah, basically. I mean, especially the probanic gnathids, were just like, hey, do you ever want the most perfect transitional form that could possibly be devised? Well,
God loved Robert Broom a lot.
Yes, he did.
Basically,
really went out of his way. And then the other factor that I always want to remind everybody of, paleogenomics. That gradually, bit by bit by bit, they're working out the ability to retro-engineer earlier fossil forms. So they've been doing this with elements of mammal teeth. They've been doing it with dinosaur body parts and bird body parts to where they're able to work out what genes are involved and tweak them experimentally. And that's only going to get more and more and more detailed because they started out with just protein genes and then they started working into cis regulatory networks, and it's only a matter of time. So that's going to be a bigger and bigger and bigger data field that creationists are going to have to eventually move the goalposts on. Maybe you'll get down to some point where a late 21st century standing for truth is trying to argue that we can retro-engineer by evolutionary principles the kinds on board the Ark.
That'll be amusing. That'll be interesting. Yeah.
So RJ, what an interesting thing about paleogenomics is I was listening to a podcast earlier yesterday on ancient viruses that touched on that. I think I was telling you about that earlier. But the speaker was discussing about how with her work with pine martens and ancestral populations of pine martens from the earlier Pleistocene, she was like, yeah, we're getting to the point where very soon we're going to be able to distinguish coat color range and perhaps eye color range and things like that.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome.
It's just proceeding by leaps and bounds, and the ability to do computer modeling enables them to number crunch lots of possibilities. That the whole kaleidistic revolution came about because computers came into play. So you could have thousands of character states that then you can look at all the different possibilities and then work your way through parsimony to try to figure out ones that are the most plausible relating to the actual biology. Well, that same thing is going to be applying in paleogenomics as they work through. They take the genetic sequences. What would an ancestral biology need to be able to do? And then you retro-engineer it, and then you test it out experimentally, and that gives you further clues as to, oh, well, if we work this out, then we can model what the likelihood of this particular mutation is, and that would explain why this is only coming up rarely as opposed to this other mutation that's relatively common and affects things easier. And creationists aren't going to like the rest of the century, folks.
No, they're not going to have an easy time.
They haven't liked the last 2 centuries or so, so why should
true,
the next
but
one be any
boy,
different?
To replace Darwin, don't you know?
Yeah.
Very, very
When
nice.
I think of how little was known when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, and I have seen in my own lifetime, not only were they just working out that DNA was the mechanism of inheritance when I was born, they were then figuring out that it was the codon triplets in the 1960s, and plate tectonics in the 1970s in geology, and then homeobox genes were discovered in the 1990s, and then this vast range since the 1990s, every fossil area that you can think of has exploded with the amount of information available, and then all the paleobiogeography that's being done, and paleoclimatology, which we need to do because we have to figure out what we're doing now to make sure we're not screwing things up, so we have to know why previous ecologies did what they did. Oh, this is a golden age for people who are science geeks, gang.
It truly is.
Although I would like to say that for the last probably 400 years, everyone has been able to say that.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is
exponential.
Yeah, which is great because it seems like every generation people can look for the last, like I said, 4-ish centuries. You can always look back and say, gee, we're learning so much now, and we've got all this great new knowledge, and so hopefully this isn't actually a gold age. Hopefully what's actually going to happen is 200 years from now they're going to look back at the 2020 and be like,
build on the tool,
those guys.
figure out even more things to go.
That would be amazing.
Hey, Erica, there was another thing I wanted to point out here, now that I've just noticed it. So, you know how Jensen does this whole song and dance about how the mtDNA mutation rate must be constant?
Yes.
You know, in the same book, he argues that African populations have to have 2 times the mutation rate because otherwise you don't get the diversity in 6,000 years.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
So it's constant. It's constant because geologists need constant rates until he doesn't need constant rates.
Right.
And now it's something else.
Look, Colton, it's
God.
constant except when it's not. Just, I don't know why you evolutionists can't figure this out. It's
'Cause
constant
I'm a
except when it's not.
dogmatic alien, and what would I know?
If memory serves, there's a very similar repetition of that in the chapter after the mitochondrial DNA, where they touch on nuclear DNA, or rather, where Jensen touches on nuclear DNA. Yeah, it's really interesting how they just get to pick and choose what's constant and what's not. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could do that?
I've thought that a lot. Like, I
Cool,
look at
dinosaur soft tissue. It decays slower than you think. Done.
Well, that's why I love seeing that Gibbons and Pearson stuff from '97. That I go, oh, we know all about that example that he brought up. That there was they made the mistake. Gibbons made the mistake of using the line that it was affirming the Noah time frame, the idea of only a few thousand years bit. And it was referring to a very specific kind of detail. And it turned out that it was wrong in retrospect. But the point is, if you were looking at this from only 1997, here Jensen was arguing in the 21st century, still trotting out that authority quote, when in fact we now had DNA from Neanderthals. We have a whole bunch, I think it's like 50 or 100 different samples of archaic humans that we have DNA on, and they cannot find this supposed deterioration in the genome.
Wow, it's almost like science has advanced past that point.
Yeah, it didn't stop.
Imagine.
Jensen's brain stopped in 1997 in the era of fax machines and VCRs, and along comes little Parasite standing for truth, copying that little trope that still plays a role. It popped up in Ruby and Sanford's Human Evolution book as well.
Man, I'm just saying, as far as the hominid slowdown hypothesis, it's really hitting them hard cognitively, is it not?
Oh, yeah. And the fact that we've got the Neanderthal DNA, I never dreamed that I would live to the point where they would be able to actually have the DNA from all of these, from these more recent examples. But that shows you how much fossils you got and how the technology is advanced.
Yeah,
I anticipate what Standing's going to say in response to these confirmed predictions of the slowdown hypothesis is something along the lines of, well, Jensen thinks that these aren't reliable sequences, so pee-pee poo-poo, you can't use that. And it's like, okay, but...
It's going to be either that, or it's going to be the same thing about Mitochondrial Eve, which is that you're using, or not Mitochondrial Eve, I mistake, the ENCODE project, where he's going to be like, well, it was done using evolutionary predictions, so that's why.
Yes! You have to assume your model before you make predictions off of it, but that doesn't make those predictions less testable.
Right. How would you do otherwise? What would be the situation in which you don't assume the model and then make predictions?
I would assume he's going to just say, well, Jensen doesn't think these sequences are reliable, so pee-pee poo-poo, you can't use that. And it's like, well, if the thing is, if you're going to say, you can make predictions all you want, but I get to decide when your data is bad, and what data you're allowed to use. And yes, I will tell you that you can only use data that would only, in principle, support me.
Yeah.
And you still have to figure out how I'm wrong. Do it.
The thing is that, and I'm going to let you guys go in a second because I'm like about to pass out. So I'm very tired. It's like 1:15 here. But what I wanted to say was, in my second conversation with Standing, we were talking about the ENCODE project. And I keep bringing this up because it drives me crazy. But I said to Standing, I said, okay, so you are saying in this conversation with me right now that the trajectory, based on solely on the ENCODE project, the human functionality of the genome or functionality of the human genome is just going to keep going up and up and up. Which, by the way, he has been sort of lectured on by CRISPR before, the YouTuber CRISPR, numerous times in like 4 different discussions. Nonetheless, I said, so you're going to suggest that we're going to continue finding functionality. What about this 2017 paper that says we found the cap to that?
The one by Dan Grauer?
Yeah, with Grauer. And he basically said exactly what you said, Corp. He said, pee-pee poo-poo, that doesn't count evolutionary predictions. And I was like, I don't understand what criteria, and that's me joking, of course, but I don't understand the criteria that he's using to hand wave it. I don't get it.
I get the criteria.
The point is to be vague, so that way you get to say what data your opponent is allowed to use or not.
Right. And the criteria ultimately comes down to, I can't be wrong, because then it interrupts something fundamental to what I consider my identity to be, which is a Christian with these particular theological points. That's the real criteria that it comes down to. That's true for all of this stuff. It always comes down to, if I'm wrong, then it upsets my religious beliefs. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sorry, but there are religious beliefs. I'm going to say it this way. There are 2 categories that I lump religious theologies into, and I guess we can just call them religions. They're the ones that we can say could be true, because we can't say that they're definitely not true. But then there are the ones that can't be true. Absolutely, we know that they're not true. Yeah, I would actually put Islam into the cannot be true, because it has internal contradictions extremely blatantly. The biggest one is it basically says you have to believe the Bible, because the Bible agrees with the Quran, but then it doesn't. So I guess so long Islam.
You have to believe the Bible because the Bible agrees with the Quran, even though the Bible says you cannot add a single word to this. This is it. This is done.
Oh,
Zip.
but Ken Ham gets to rewrite Job.
Well,
oh my God.
Yeah. So one of the sets of religions that have to be wrong is any religion that involves any of the young Earth creationist beliefs about the Earth being young or evolution being fake. That's not the whole set of things that are Christianity, right? Christianity, I think, as a whole is in the category of could be true, along with a lot of other religions.
But not, and it's because it's been revising its lore to keep itself in sync with the available data. So you found the ones in the Renaissance having to grapple with that heliocentrism thing, and then they grappled with the geology, matter, and extinction in the 18th and 19th century, and then a Darwin comes along and they have to grapple with that, and then the Big Bang is worked out and they realize they have to grapple with that element, and that branch is very good at retrofitting, and there's branches of Islam and Hinduism that do the same kind of retrofitting to make themselves consistent with it. But all the ones that jump off the gangplank and take the original doctrine straight up to where the Hindus technically think that the moon is farther away from the earth than the sun is in their cosmology. And you've got the young earth creationist with the day 4, with the sun created after plants. You know, any of that, excuse me, you're off the field.
Actually, that reminds me, one thing I'd like to get into sometime on maybe my channel or maybe in a collaboration with Gutsick Gibbon or something is some of the what I would call like the hyper old Earth stuff going on in Hinduism, where they're like, oh no, the Earth has been about
that gang.
Yeah, the Earth has been around for trillions of years, and humans have been on Earth for billions of years. That might be interesting.
The fact that they literally they will even cite young Earth creationist arguments against radiometric dating and then say, see, this means the rock is trillions of times older than these methods say.
Remember, the Hindus discovered 0, so they can just put in as many as they like.
Hey, you guys, real fast, let me hop in here. I jumped over to the SFT after show to see what their side chat was saying because I'm a little tipsy and I thought maybe I'll go.
They didn't like us.
No, but Lil YC says at some point, SFT, what's your response to the hominid slowdown hypothesis? And you scroll down a little bit and you get SFT. Hold on, I'm trying to scroll down. I'm coordinated at the moment. You get SFT saying it's their rescue device, Lil YC. LOL, who cares? And then in parentheses, Raw Matt. So I guess that's Raw Matt saying that.
Yeah, and by the way, this actually ties in surprisingly well because we have a $5 US super chat from Anamorphic Mind who says, you should listen to the SFT after show he is having right now. Just make sure you're wearing oven mitts. So
he's doing his own after show. Why couldn't he have showed up here?
Well, is SFT actually in like live on it?
It looks like, okay, this is what I'm seeing with my eyeballs. I see a raw mat icon, a logical, plausible, probable icon, which of course is our friend John Maddox, an SFT muted icon, and Jason Azard, who we, Dapper, know very personally as Faithful, Honest, and True.
Yes.
Oh,
Faithful,
that is
True.
a quartet. That's the apocalypse, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of dumb.
We really have. The only one who's missing is Sneffy, and it would be the gang is all here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Neffy would want to be in control of the dogma.
Yeah, Neffy likes to lead.
Yeah.
Nephilim free Archbishop of Stupid.
Oh, man. Actually, I can't remember. I know at some point I made a video with a clip of Nephilim Free saying that he thinks that the Earth is the center of the universe and the universe rotates around the Earth, because I know he now denies ever having been a geocentrist. I'm wondering, like, did I actually upload that? Or no, I know I've uploaded it if I made it, but I'm wondering if have I actually released that yet? Because I gotta go.
I don't think so, but you need to at least share the video of eating paper.
Oh yeah. Oh man. The Nephi eating paper.
Sure, I want to know about that.
Oh, it makes no sense at all. It's just Nephilim Free trying to make fun of evolution by stuffing sheet after sheet of paper into his mouth.
Oh God, I've seen that. That is just pathetic.
It's
holy moly.
It's
The
perplexing.
little respect I had for him disappeared completely with seeing that.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say, yeah, that reminds me of something my my dog does when she's got a sock she's not supposed to.
Erica.
Hey, don't we know there is no dog?
Oh, go ahead, RJ.
Don't we know there is no dog?
Well, the dyslexic atheists all know that. Yeah.
Hey, come on,
there is
Dapper.
no dog.
We hate dog. Don't you know that?
Oh, right. Why do you hate dog?
Yeah.
100 questions for dyslexic atheists. Why do you hate
Exactly.
dogs?
Exactly. Sorry, PB. Go ahead.
Yeah, on Raw Matt's response to the Hominid's mitochondrial slowdown hypothesis, all I'm hearing is evolutionary assumption
That is
literally what it is.
what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be a delightfully fun video. We should reconvene sometime soon and get some content.
Yes.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we definitely should. Let's schedule something on Twitter. I'm trying to have plans for tomorrow. I don't know if that's going to fall through, so maybe don't make it tomorrow. But yeah, we should definitely schedule something.
Oh, Dapper, before I go, and for those of you here on the panel, if you guys would like, I've been having some lovely conversations with a young high schooler over email and once over Skype, who's very interested in evolution, and he's a smart young kid, and he asked me, actually, Dapper, specifically if you would be willing to have a conversation with him. And I said, I'm sure Dapper would love to have a chat with you. I said, he's your guy for dinosaurs. And I said, I happen to know a couple of other people that I'm sure would love to.
Count me in if they. I'm easy
I'll be in
peasy.
the live chat. But I'm not in Dapper's live chat.
Well, yeah, there's that. So my
I'm
only
in his
thing
live chat
is
right now.
just make sure that he gets permission from any parents or guardians that he can be here, and also I would rather that he not use his real name or be on camera, just for purposes of YouTube. Not
Sure, I didn't record my conversation with him. We just chatted.
Okay. Yeah, well, we can do that too. I'm just saying, if he wants to be live, like if he wants to do a live hangout thing, that's something we can set up as long as we follow those particular rules. And if he just wants to have a quick little chat, I mean,
just a video thing where there's a discussion and he's picking our brains.
Yeah,
that's really what it was. He had some very excellent questions. He was asking mostly about nested hierarchies and how we distinguish between what would be a design and what isn't. And I was like, that's the kicker. You don't. Not if they're retrodicting and saying that nested hierarchies are naturally a part of the design. But yeah, he's a great kid. I'm sure he'd love to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I would like to have a chat too. And like I said, if he wants it to be on the channel, then assuming that we take the proper precautions, I'm okay with that. And if he just wants to have a private little chat with a bunch of us, I'm okay with that too. We can just set up a Google Hangout or something like that and bring him on. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. I like talking to people who are honestly inquiring about this. And,
and he's not a creationist of any sort.
Yeah. Questions are good. There's no such thing as a bad question, even from a creationist. Only useful or uninformative answers.
Sure, right. Absolutely.
Yep. Actually, it reminds me. I was having a Zoom meeting with some of my family or I guess just over a week ago. So it wasn't this Sunday; it was the past one before that. And at one point, I stepped away. So to keep my nieces and nephews reasonably entertained, I switched my camera over to my avatar looping, so that way that rather than just a blank screen, they'd see that. And then when I came back, they wanted to see the avatar talking. So I put on Things That Aren't Dinosaurs 4 on Dimetrodon. Well, one of the pictures I have when I'm talking about how Dimetrodons are synapsids is a picture of some Gorgonopsids attacking a Scutosaurus. And so my nephew runs and grabs the Gorgonops that I got him for, I think, his last birthday. And he was like, I have one of these. And so he starts asking questions about the little toy that I got him and the Gorgonops and what kind of dinosaur and is it a dinosaur? And I was just like, oh. And his little sister was absolutely enraptured by the talking dinosaur on the screen for Things That Aren't Dinosaurs 4. So it was the most adorable thing that's happened in a long time.
There's some uncertainty, but there's the possibility that the Gorgonopsids were a group that developed a different way of having a secondary jaw hinge coming from a different part of the dentary bone than the one that we full-blown mammals ended up using.
Well, that's interesting. I did not know about that.
Yeah, I alluded to that in I think in Evolution Slam Dunk. More thing when Ian Chen comes through with little gifts and things, you'll be able to plow through.
I'm so excited.
I have already started my read through of Evolution Slam Dunk, and Ian Chen has been extremely generous when it comes to my Amazon wish list, which, if anyone wants to, there's an Amazon wish list. Don't feel like it's something that you have to do. Just whatever.
Ian Chen is an OG.
Yeah.
He's absolutely...
Which, you know what? I'm going to ask on his behalf. Erica, where's that Amazon wish list?
Yeah, I know. The thing is that I'm trying to get. Remember, I told you guys I had this video done last night, my hiccuping video. Why do humans hiccup? And yeah, and then my internet's been wonky basically since mid yesterday, I guess.
Oh.
It was bad pretty much all day, all the way up until the halfway through the conversation with Chesh. Now it's good again. I don't know what the deal is.
So Ian, if you're watching this, and I'm extremely confident that you will watch this at some point, because when does Ian Chen miss any of our videos, right, Erica?
Yes, Ian is an OG for that reason as well.
Exactly. So Ian, this is for you, because I know that you're going to be watching this in the future. Erica is working on it, and we're blaming technical difficulties and not the fact that Erica hasn't put how to stop procrastinating on her wish list yet.
Listen, Ian, this time it's not my fault. Sometimes it's not me. Most of the time it's me. Sometimes
I've been meaning to join the Procrastinators Society for years.
Yeah.
I'm a lifetime member.
Ah.
I am perpetually in the state of almost joining as well.
Oh, Xanath Carthage asks, what set would help, or would... Oh, I'm going to go ahead and assume he means best instead of beat. Help your Horus Heresy army. So, by the way, the army I'm trying to put together, I'm hoping that I can use it as either a 30 or 40k army. That's one of the reasons I'm using a mix of Chaos and 30k type models. But right now, I think the thing that would help probably the most would either be the Chaos Space Marine box set, or just straight up some paint, honestly. Pick an amount that if you want to get me something from that for the 40k thing, which, by the way, when I actually really get in earnest, this is a bit off topic, guys. I'm sorry. This is some nerdy stuff. TD Lane may care.
Derailment.
I know.
I'll get it.
So my plan is basically when I get the infantry box sets that I plan on using to start out my core guys, which is going to be 3 Chaos Space Marine squads / tactical squads and 1 Havoc / Devastator squad. When I get those box sets, there's going to be some kit bashing so that nothing is too Chaos or too Horus Heresy. And then there will be painting from there. And my current plan is to use a system where I'm going to be base coating with a metallic base coat, and then using contrast paints in a fairly carefully predetermined setup to get the metallic blue-green on the Alpha Legion armor. So that is a preview. Basically, anything that's on the wish list is going to work towards that. But I suppose if I had to say which one is going to be the most helpful the soonest, the Chaos Space Marine box set would probably be it. That being said, if you get me the Mark III tactical armor, or the Mark III tactical squad, or the Devastator, or I guess it's a Havoc squad, or the Havoc squad, any of those would be similarly helpful.
Are you going to have any amphibious assault vehicles?
So that's a little... One thing is that I don't know that anything in the Chaos Space Marine Codex is particularly amphibious. So I will probably end up getting some armored troop transports, though, in the form of Rhino APCs. Yeah.
I was hoping you would, because you could watch them evolve.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously.
We hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dapper, clearly an Imperator class Titan counts as an amphibious assault vehicle.
I mean, only in the sense that it can probably stand in most oceans without going past its waist.
Clearly
If,
amphibious.
if memory serves me, amphibious assault vehicles would be a 1940s World War II invention initially, and both the
believe
Germans
so.
and the Allies developed them. I think Volkswagen
they
built a model that they
the
used during the war.
Okay, RJ, you've gone into my nerd territory.
The Duck.
Early attempts at amphibious vehicles were often not that great, although the Germans had some success with the Kugelwagen variant.
Yeah.
The Americans had very iffy success with it at D-Day with the Sherman DDs. To say the least, a lot of them did not make it.
Well, that's true for everything at D-Day.
It really came into its own from the Russians, though, in the Cold War with the the BMD.
There was a lot of improvisation, and everyone was in an effing hurry.
But did they fall into a nested hierarchy?
Yeah, there we go.
That's the real question.
Because the Russians threw those goddamn amphibious things everywhere because they realized they had an advantage because the Americans didn't.
Nice.
Well, and one structural thing that makes a difference between the Russians and the Germans and the Allies, and the Russians would, if they had a choice between a more sophisticated device they couldn't have many of, and tons of something that wasn't so sophisticated, but they could really churn them out, they would go for that, for aircraft and tanks and a bunch of things in that direction. They preferred volume over quality, and it was not a bad strategy.
Oh, no, it wasn't. With their amphibious vehicles, they weren't terribly complex, but they were still sophisticated enough to work.
Well,
the derailment just got derailed even further.
It's not a bad. Well, the thing is, it's not a bad strategy if your strategy is military as your primary thing. However, if your strategy is let's maintain a reasonably sane, sustainable economy that won't lead to the overthrow of the government as a result of people being unable to do things like eat, then it wasn't the greatest strategy.
Yeah, that could be a thing.
Because
then again, the Stalinists were never overly concerned with whether people survived or not.
No, not really. Confused communist noises.
Basically. So I don't want to get too far into things like economics and politics, but basically the stricter the controls are in a command economy, the less able that economy is going to be to actually function in a way that actually supports human needs for the population, which is the whole point of an economy.
And aren't even necessarily very good at meeting their tactical goals. When you look at the details of the German system, they did a lot of money wasting.
Henry Hansen says nationalism did in the Soviet Union. It didn't help, but even with a complete absence of nationalism, the entire idea. So basically, the Soviet Union's big thing was what is now today in sort of more capitalist economies called vertical integration. So the idea is, okay, this is a company that produces, say, gold bullion. Well, why own mints when you can own mints and gold mines and companies that produce drilling equipment and companies that produce explosives? So you can funnel all of this towards your gold mining and gold minting coins, right? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because the farther the vertical integration persists, the harder it is to use price information to judge what the efficient way of producing whatever good it is that you're trying to produce. The harder that becomes, because rather than paying prices, all of those things are internal, and so you have a hard time telling whether or not you're being efficient with what raw resources you're using.
And worse, they were USSR Inc. They were all the worst aspects of a company town.
Oh, yeah. And so with all of these things going, and essentially complete vertical integration, and you have to buy from the company store and all this, it became essentially impossible to conduct what economists call economic calculation, where you say, what is the efficient use of this iron and this wood and this tin and this whatever? Essentially, that's why you had things where, like, the Soviet Union had an abundance of tractors and a shortage of gasoline, where there were just tractors rusting in fields because they couldn't actually put fuel in them.
And then layer in the political infighting and the people who had the right political positions being in charge of things like Lysenko and the agricultural system. This is not a system that works well.
No, it doesn't. Now, you can have the arguments as to whether or not, like, what degree of economic freedom is best and things, but the fact is that the command economy simply cannot function. It is broken to the very core. There is
because
no option.
Economics is a nonlinear system, so that means you can't control it in principle. And then the other problem is that the essence of a market capitalist invention society is it's horribly revolutionary.
Mhm.
It says no matter what you did before, if we can come up with something better, you stop doing that. And that is the opposite of bureaucracy. It's the opposite of tradition. It's the opposite of status quo. So it's at terrible loggerheads. You didn't think we were getting into this deep in the discussion,
Hey,
did you, Eric?
I know this is outside my realm. I'm not good with history. I mean,
History is my gig, and obviously a bit of it is the dinosaur in that as well. But I've studied a lot of that on why, and we can even spread even farther over to the issue of why science and industry didn't develop in the Chinese society when they had so many advantages. This is bigger macroeconomic stuff that's absolutely, or why the Romans didn't develop these kind of things, which connects up with educational systems and social norms. There's oodles of stuff to talk about. We should do a show.
Actually, RJ, I wrote a fairly interesting paper about the effects on the results of cantillon effects on the Roman economy during the late imperial period in the Western Roman Empire.
Oh, we should discuss that.
Anyways, guys, it's getting late, so I need to go to bed.
All right. I'll give a.
Don't worry. I got one last thing, actually. I've got one last thing for us, because we probably should end.
Soon.
Okay, hit us with the TV.
Well, one of the fantastic little things, if you look into history, is that the Greek phalanx formation wasn't actually all that inflexible. It was just that everybody after Alexander just kind of used it completely wrong, except for the Epirites.
Big surprise, right? It worked once, so it'll just keep working forever.
Yeah.
The inertia of the system.
The thing is, it wasn't even that. It was that they just weren't using it like Alexander did.
Oh, and by the way,
supporting it.
Speak of the devil.
It heavy cavalry and the light infantry, like Alexander used the formation. The formation was just a block of heavy infantry not doing anything useful.
Speak of the devil, for $2.99 dues, Ian Chen says, RJ rocks, everyone get his book.
I can't disagree with that.
All right. So I'm going to say, I'll let Erica, I'll talk to you later. You have a good night.
Hi,
and schedule that now we have several things to schedule. So
we're gonna call
Thanks
the
Erica, for the help on the debate with standing.
Man, RJ, I was happy to do it. I had a great time in our chat this afternoon, and I was Standing tries to sneak up. I've done this rodeo. That's the only reason I was helpful. All right, guys. See you later.
Later.
Bye.
So I do want to give a quick little thing about the cantillon effects. So cantillon effects are the effects that occur due to the uneven distribution of new money in a monetary inflation period.
And that was a plague of the whole Roman Empire.
Their
inflationary monetary policy.
So what happens is monetary inflation is essentially when the issuing agency, which is almost always a state, increases the total supply of whatever the monetary unit is. In modern day, that simply happens because governments can simply create money out of thin air. In Roman times, money was still based on precious metals, and so what they would do is they would call in all of the coins. So we'll just, for instance, let's say they call in all the silver coins, right?
And debase them?
They mix in a certain amount of things like tin into the silver coins. They give them all back out, but now because you've mixed in tin, you have a higher total volume of metal, and the extra metal goes to the imperial treasury. Now, when it initially gets out there, everyone gets back the same amount that they put in, and so the prices don't initially change. But what the state can then do is pay for services at the old prices with a newly larger amount of money, and then the first people who get that money get to then go and buy goods at only slightly inflated prices, and then those next people that they buy goods from get to spend that money at not quite the same price as the initial group. And so as it trickles down, everyone gets more and more devalued currency.
Yeah.
And so one of the problems that this makes is that you get to pick favorites, not by taxing some people more than others or giving out welfare checks or anything. even corporate welfare checks, you get to pick favorites simply by who the issuing agency for this monetary unit opts to do business with. So if you decide that the person you're going to contract to build the wall around the new Imperial Palace is Gaius's Construction and Company, they get the added benefit of getting this money early. And so this created a system of have and have-nots in this, especially in the city of Rome, but also throughout the rest of the empire over time, where certain people simply by getting contracts with the empire got to spend money at higher amounts, and then it caused ever more poverty, and eventually it created problems where there simply wasn't enough, people just didn't have enough money to buy the things that they needed because they'd all been impoverished through debasement of the currency, which at the people at the bottom of this Cantillon ladder, if you will.
No, they become serfs.
Yeah. So I wrote a night. I don't know that I still have a copy of it, but I went through and I looked at charts of silver content in Roman coins and who various Roman empires would bother to contract with.
There's quite a literature on that because it's a big thing in Roman history.
Well, it's a big thing even in modern history. So
the German hyperinflation and all of that. Yeah.
Look at Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Now, and the other thing is,
silver comes to mind.
Yep. And actually, it still happens today. Like, the United States has Cantillon effects. So, for instance, when the Federal Reserve decides to go enact monetary policy where they essentially simply buy, basically, they buy bonds with money that didn't exist until they bought the bond.
First to buy the bonds are the first one in the door for the...
Exactly. So this is not something that is just of historical interest. And like I said, I don't want to get too far into economics.
But it's 1893 depression. That was caused in part by the silver purchase policies, which was inflationary monetary policy under the Harrison administration.
Yep. So yeah, hey, I actually do have that economics degree hanging on my wall. Or not economics, I'm sorry, history. But actually, my economics professor tried very hard to get me to minor in economics. Very, very hard. I mean, oh my goodness, did she try?
Anybody that wants to understand the wealth of nations and the history of things has got to pay attention to the economic dynamics of what's going on, because you can't just view it as politics, religion, or any single monovariable.
Which actually, it's one of the reasons why I get a little bit upset about the people who dismiss economic concerns about the current lockdown out of hand. Because the thing is, the economy is what keeps you alive.
Yeah.
At a fundamental level, if you
needed a system that created a virtual economy, even though it was biting the bullet, so that nobody was laid off, you wouldn't be taxing the unemployment system and driving everything into that. But instead, we've got this piecemeal mess that is going to be tougher to pull ourselves out of.
So yeah, it's one of those things. And actually, I saw a meme that was it was the asteroid. It's one of those pictures of, the dinosaur standing around as the asteroid is crashing into the Earth, and there's a T-Rex that says, "Oh no, the economy." And the thing is, though, if you were a T-Rex, you weren't getting killed by the blast from that asteroid, right? The Chicxulub impactor was not going to be what killed you directly. What actually was going to kill you was the fact that the things you ate were running out of things that they could eat, which essentially is the economy of the Cretaceous, which is how you produce enough energy to stay alive. So actually what caused the extinction of the T-Rex was the economy going bad. And so while I'm not saying that it's time to, end the shutdown and open America back up, if you are simply dismissing economic concerns out of hand because you think that, all that matters is preventing infections and direct
deaths. Even on
deaths,
things like oil production, oil dropping so quickly that there are some oil wells that if you can't just shut them down. If you shut them down, you won't be able to restart them.
Right.
There's pressure issues involved. And so there's a lot of small jobbers who are really in a desperate state. Then you've got to know, even if you just arbitrarily keep pumping oil, where do you store it when nobody is buying oil to use for aircraft and automobiles and all the rest?
That's
so there's
why
a cascading network that has to be paid attention to.
Well, that's why oil futures went negative.
Yeah.
People were being paid to take oil away from various oil
I thought
companies.
One of the things they probably should have done would just simply just to save on the storage space, have the oil companies give gasoline away to people to empty their tanks so that they could fill up and keep the supply network, because we pretty well topped out how much we have for emergency storage. So you're going to have to deal with the networks elsewhere.
Yeah. And only Germany.
Like, at the current moment, gasoline is $2.20 at Costco here.
Yeah.
which is unheard of in California.
Yeah. Well, and
we're
ugly,
still running around 220 here. When I get my royalty check, hopefully towards the end of the month, then I'm going to go and tank up.
ugly German
I
truths.
still got a little over half a tank left from February.
Ugly German Truths notes that nobody should dismiss it fully, but the damage from an unlimited viral outbreak would be so much worse. And that's often the case, but there is a certain point at which the balance tips the other way.
Because we got to figure out how to do both,
Right.
and the current administration ain't very good at that.
Oh, no, it's not. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should be using 1918 as an example of
Right.
what happens when it goes too far one way.
right, but the
As
thing is,
okay, we know that's
in the wrong
too
other
far.
direction.
We need to balance this.
so for instance,
But
currently there are already shortages in some food products in some parts of the world that normally do not deal with food shortages. And the thing is that is a potential that could spread to even more important foodstuffs. It could, a significant or a long enough economic shutdown could lead to an actual famine in the first world, which could potentially kill more people than the virus could ever. So I'm not saying it's time to open up, but what I am saying is it is a real concern, and a lot of people focus one way or the other. Like, I know a lot of people who are like, oh no, if the economy doesn't come back up, everyone's going to die. It's like, no, they won't. And I know a lot of other people who are like, we need to just keep everything shut down until the virus is extinct. And it's like, that's not realistic either.
Yeah, no,
you have to have you needed to be able to think through multiple interacting economic variables simultaneously, and the little narrow vision gang that's in charge ain't very good at doing that.
Right.
obviously it can't be just like everything opening up at once either. New York, for example, it's not going to be open for a while.
Right.
Because of the condition it's in.
Well, I think it is about time for some wrap-up stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask RJ what he has coming up. Then we're going to go to TD Lane, and we're going to end with what I have coming up on this channel. So RJ, what do you got?
Oh, well, we're continuing with Evolution Hour every Wednesday, and I'm plowing through the preparation work when Jackson and I will be resuming work on our Rocks Were There Volume 2.
Nice.
And future projects as well. And I'm also about 3/4 of the way through the second Phileas Fogg novel. So I'm keeping busy. And the advantage of being an old retired fart in his den is that the lockdown means I'm basically doing the same thing I was before without a problem.
All right. And by the way, if you want to catch up with RJ for his Evolution Hour or any of his other videos, his channel is linked in the description, as is Standing for Truths. So if you want to see what they're up to over there, go check that out.
Compare notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to discourage you from going over to Standing for Truth. You should go and check out Standing for Truth's channel. I watch it, not every video, but I watch a fair bit of it. So please go over and check out both RJ and Standing. Yeah. So TD Lane, what do you got?
Well, I took a little break from working on my next video for the weekend and Friday, but tomorrow I'm going to resume work. And it'll be out either this Sunday or sometime next week.
All right. Let's see. For the Dapper Dino channel, Tuesday is very likely to be Kent with Bent 26. If it's not, I'm going to see if we can swing an Eric with Erica. And if for some reason we can't do either, it might just be a Tuesday that we miss. And I'm sorry if that's the case. The reason that it's still a little bit up in the air is that Benthoven works at a hospital, but he's doing something that until recently was not going on because it wasn't, it's not that it wasn't necessary, but it was that it saved lives on the order of months to years rather than days or hours. And so the hospital simply wasn't doing it. I don't want to get too specific on it because I don't know exactly how much Benthoven wants to release about, his job and everything.
Enough said.
Yeah. So it's not like it's unimportant. It's not optional, but it's longer term than what was going on until very recently.
Enough is involved.
Right.
And that's all that need to be said.
So there's a question as to how much he's going to have to work on any given day because various procedures are being scheduled and canceled at seemingly random from the standpoint of an outsider. So, so that almost certainly will be going through those. Kent with Bent on Tuesday. Thursday, right now it is looking like it's going to be the final episode of Noah's Zookeeper. There's a slight chance that I'll end up finishing a video beforehand and it will be something else. Saturday, I'm not sure, but I may be trying to get in touch with someone who I moderated a debate for, who was a young Earth creationist when I moderated the debate, but who is now an old Earth creationist and who is undecided on matters of evolution. So that might be a discussion we have. Yeah. So we'll probably go over his change in terms of geology and starlight and things like radiometric dating.
That may be more interesting than the post-mortem final things on Noah's Zookeeper, since that had an information quantity of 0.
Well, I like to think I gave a little bit of information, RJ.
Oh, yes, but I mean, from her end.
Oh, right. Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to be getting through more creatures for the Speculative Evolution project, so expect that. However, tomorrow,
just did a blue blob, didn't you?
I did. I just did I think there were 8 organisms in the last one I did, although one was a bit of a twofer because there was a symbiotic relationship.
I keep on confusing them for real organisms, and then I have to look and see, oh, that's that thing that Dapper put.
Oh, I don't think my sculpts are that good, but thank you.
Well, given how weirdly varied organisms are, especially in the small invertebrate critters that live in the sea department,
that's true.
Some of those are not at all that implausible, especially in the fossil record.
That's true, and actually, I have to give props to my community that's helping me with this. Which, by the way, if you want to join in on, I'm not currently accepting new submissions yet. We're going to wait until I finish the submissions that I have when we move on to phase 3, which is going to skip us forward a few million years. But if you want to get involved in things like discussions about organisms that currently exist, potential extinction events, things like that, check out my fan Discord server, which should be linked in the description. And if it's not linked in the description here, it is in other videos. Just check a few.
It's kind of apropos this issue, the brand new paper that came out about Monstrum gregarium, where they've figured that it's most probably a chordate. It's this weird little critter that popped up in the Loch Ness Monster lore to some extent. It's a tiny little critter, but it resembled something that reminded people of what a larger creature like the Loch Ness Monster theoretically could be. But, you know, that was just a side issue. So I've always kept in my brain Monstrum gregarium, and it was a mysterious little critter that dates, I think, the Paleozoic. That turns out, it's probably an odd chordate.
Well, it's been an odd chordate before, so I'm waiting until a little bit more confirmation comes out, because this isn't the first time that it's been a chordate and then had that reversed. So yeah,
it's a vague creature.
Yeah. So there is actually a video that I've had on the back burner for a little bit, but it's probably going to get done, which is there is someone who has been scamming people in various sci-fi fantasy communities as well as paleo communities with promising them fairly high quality reproductions of fossils or characters from these franchises, and then simply not delivering after having taken hundreds of dollars from people.
That is not nice.
No, it's not. And because it intersects, because it intersects with a lot of communities that I'm a part of. I'm going to try and bring that to people's attention. So that might end up being either this Tuesday or next Tuesday. Tomorrow, don't even try to contact me. I'm taking tomorrow off. If you're not someone who I'm going to hang out with for fun, like if you're not playing video games with me, or we're not someone who just, chats about random crap, and if you think you're not in that category, then you're probably not. If you think you are in that category, then you might be. But yeah, tomorrow I'm not doing anything. Let's see. I think Chesh and I might try to watch a movie together. That's going to be the extent of my involvement with the community outside of like hanging out doing nothing tomorrow. So,
or you might just walk up next to a wall and rub your little scoots along the wall boards and that, because it feels so good.
Quick question.
It does actually. I don't know. So. Okay, here's the extent of me planning with Chesh about this. I said to Chesh a few days ago, hey, we both need a day off. And she said, yes. And I said, well, let's watch a movie, have drinks and snacks. And then she said, yes. And I said, Monday. And we both said, maybe. That's what happened. That's the whole amount of planning, was we both said to each other, we need a day off. And we might like to do something to hang out. So because I'm planning on trying to take Monday off, I might do a little bit of art for the channel. It's iffy. So yeah, If you email me tomorrow, you're not going to get a response. If you try to message me on Discord, you're not going to get a response. Even if you try to message me on Twitter, I mean, I might read some of these things, but
You
I'm
don't
probably
want me to
not gonna reply.
teleport you at any point.
Yeah, no, please don't teleport me.
Okay, I'll put that on.
So yeah, also,
Can I telegraph you?
yes, if you can find a working telegraph station, yes.
All right. Yeah, let me just get.
I believe they use these smartphones to send telegraphs, young man.
The last thing is Sunday, the 14th. I am going to be having a birthday stream because it's my birthday, and I need suggestions as to what to do. Because as I've said before, the thing that I would like to do most on my birthday is hang out with my audience, because you guys are great, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate than by having some kind of fun stream with you guys. So,
yeah.
But I don't know what that's going to be yet, because I'm still very much early on in the planning for that. So if you have ideas, put it in comments or emails or whatever, and just understand that I'm not going to see it tomorrow. But please let me know what your ideas are for what you would like to see for a birthday stream. Would you like to see a debunking? Would you like to see something that's just for fun? Would you like to see a stream where I do like art for the Speculative Evolution project? These are all things that are on the table. I'm going to try and get a rotating group of people. I'll try to get Benthoven, maybe T. Lane, maybe RJ can come in, Erica, Eric Vierthaler, Vandalia 1998 if you want to jump in. If you're watching this, Emo, you can jump in. Cheshire Vic will probably jump in at some point. So yeah, basically, if you've been on my channel before, there's a fair chance that I'm willing to let you on for my birthday stream. So yeah, let me know what you guys are interested in comments and stuff like that, and I'll probably put up a poll once I have some ideas that I like, and we'll see what happens with that. So I think that's it. Do you guys have any last words? Final nuggets of wisdom?
That sounds about like that. We covered a lot of turf, and we digressed to the point where we got whiplash.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My final words. SFT said that even if there was a chromosome tomb fusion, it wouldn't matter.
Oh my goodness! Yes, it would matter, SFT. And also,
nothing matters to him.
Atheist Junior, can I send thoughts and prayers? Sure.
Yeah.
But look, thoughts and prayers aren't going to hurt. So send as many as you like. Yeah. So hopefully I will see all of you Tuesday for Kent with Bent 26. And if not, hopefully it's Eric with Erica 3, which doesn't have a title. But there you go.
Okay.
So everyone, have a great night. I'm really happy that y'all came, and thank you very much, especially to our super chatters, including Anamorphic Mind, Vandalia 1998, Just a Walking Fish, and Ian Chen.